G'day folks, Rod Moore here with you. Welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. We've got a fun little episode this week for you. Going to try something a little bit different. Let me show you a photo. I've been playing around with different ideas, and I've painted this little quick little sketch here of a river scene and some beautiful autumn trees or fall trees, depending on where you are in the world, reflecting into the river, and some nice birch trees over on the embankment there. So step one of the Moore method of painting, of course, is getting our drawing in. The way we do that is we start out by identifying the big shapes in the painting that we're going to do, mapping those out on the canvas, looking for where we need to place them, and keeping this drawing really simple. So if we have a look at the photo here again, you can see that there's not a lot to this. It looks like there's a lot of detail there, but in reality, what we've got is a horizon line that runs just below the halfway mark on the canvas. We've got a foreground piece of land with some rocks and foliage and where those birch trees are coming out. So I've just got my French ultramarine blue and my permanent alizarin crimson here, and I'm just going to take a small brush, this one, and a bit of water, and this is how we start our drawing. Is we just take some of that blue, some of that red, mix it together. We just want a little dark. Often it goes purpley, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter really what colour we use here at this stage. I tend to just like using those two. So I just mix it up with some water. And you can see the water there is a little bit dirty. Haven't changed my water, which is not good. Make sure you change your water. Bad habits, hey? So I'm going to find that horizon line mark is going to be just below the halfway. So it's going to run along there. That's that river embankment, okay? A little bit higher and it would have been on the halfway mark. Now, don't worry about getting that line perfect. Whatever you do, do not get masking tape out, because we want to create an impressionistic feel here. We don't want to create a technically perfect drawing. So it's important that we keep it a little bit on the loose side in order to be able to achieve that. Okay, so that's our first line. Our second line then becomes this embankment here, which runs sort of from there and it runs down something like that. Now, there's no right or wrong way to do this, as long as it's up close to there, because what I want to do is just pop a little bit of a bush there to stop the eye running out of the painting. And then we can reshape this line as we go. We know we're going to have some rocks in here, okay? But it's pretty simple. Just get that line in there. It's come past the halfway mark, okay? Halfway would be sort of there. So I've run up past the halfway mark. That's the important thing. And then we have our tree line on the river embankment, okay? So this tree line is, you can pretty much make this up any way you want, but I'm just going to run up a few trees. Try not to create repeating shapes of your trees. That'll never sort of work out well. I've got a nice big willow tree there, like Monet's home in Givany. Nice big willow tree, maybe another tree at the back. Okay, so it's something like that. Now I've got a couple of pine trees or poplar trees in there. I'm not going to put them into the drawing at this stage because they protrude so far up into the sky. I'm just going to leave those out, and we'll put those in a bit later on. So let's now just repeat that. Now the great thing about your reflections is they don't need to be identical. They just need to be roughly the same. See that? Okay, now that we've got our drawing done, we're now going to do step 2 of the Moore method of painting, which is our blocking. So our objective here is to now take these big shapes and start to get some colour down and block it in, and establish a values pattern is most important. So our darkest value is going to be in this foreground, and then this row of trees and reflection is going to be a lighter value, and it's going to be cooler and greyer. So that's what our next step is. Let's come back here now. So I'm going to take a big brush, big hog hair bristle brush. I've got French ultramarine blue, the permanent alizarin crimson, yellow ochre. That makes up our basic palette. It's our primary colours, our blue, red, and our yellow. And then we've got titanium white over here. And that's going to be what we'll use predominantly for our blocking here. Let's come back to the canvas here. So I'm going to start off with the big mass here of the foreground. I'm going to take a little touch of the water, not too much, and let's take big swipe of that blue. I'll keep mixing it in this dark mix here because we're going to mix a dark, so that'll work fine. The alizarin crimson, we'll mix that in. Okay, now it's a little on the cool side, so I'll take a bit more of that red. And notice I'm using plenty of paint. I'm a great believer with acrylics. You don't want to skimp on the paint. You want to have plenty of paint on your brush. It'll help you to mix paint easier, and also it'll help you to blend paint and get it to flow on. I've got just a little drop of water in there, okay? But I'm also using a big brush. To create realism in any object, in a painting, in an element, we need to have basically our darks, our mid-tone and our highlight tones as a minimum, right? Now you can expand the values out, but to create realistic sort of form in a shape or an element, you need to have at least those three values. And that's why we start out with our darks, okay? We need to get those shadow and dark tones in there first. And we now need to do that over here on the distant embankment and the reflections. So we'll take more of that blue. We're going to push it now more to the blue side, so to cool it down. And we're going to add a little bit of the yellow ochre, okay? You can see a little bit of the yellow ochre on there. And we're going to add that in because that will grey off this tone. So it wants to be cooler in value, which is why we added more blue. It wants to be greyer, which is why we added the yellow ochre. And it also wants to be lighter in value, which is why we'll now add the titanium white. Okay. Needs a little bit more blue in there. Pick up the rest of that. So when I pop that up there, if I do a test next to this other tone that we've already got there, you can see that there's a definite difference between the two, and that's the important thing here. So I'm just going to scrub that in. Now, don't colour in between the lines here. See, I've made marks for where our big shapes are going to be, but the worst thing you can do at this stage is try and perfectly colour in those lines, okay? We don't want to do that. We want to have the top edge of these trees looking kind of tree-like, you know, like they need to be edges that are not rounded, and except for maybe like this willow tree's definitely got a rounded feel to it, but we don't want it to be round balls on lollipop sticks. Now that we've got our darks in, our next step's going to be our sky and our water. And when I'm blocking in the darks, I don't mind if it gets a little bit thin because I know I'm going to come back and paint over it and you know, work back into what we've already done there. When it comes to the sky, I want to get the sky right in the first, you know, during the blocking phase. I don't generally like to come back to the sky. So we've got a big area there for the sky and the water. And one of the challenges a lot of beginners have is getting their paint to flow well. You know, acrylic paint can be a little bit viscous depending on what brand you're using, and it doesn't flow smoothly and evenly. So I thought what we'd do is try out this liquefying medium. Now this is a particular medium that comes with the Artilia interactive range, and you have to check with whatever brand of acrylic paint you're using as to what mediums they have. You could use a retarder just as easily, okay? The idea here is I'm just going to pour out a puddle of that onto my palette there, and I'll show you how I'm going to use that as we go. You notice it's a creamy, cloudy sort of colour, but when you mix it in, it's going to, it's not going to affect the colour of the mix that we're putting up there, okay? So we're going to do a nice blue sky, and basically it's going to be a gradient sky. We're not going to fuss with it too much. So I'll take a clean brush, again a big brush, okay? I'll take some clean French ultramarine blue here. We'll take some clean white. Okay, we'll mix those two together. Notice I'm mixing it up near the liquefying medium there. Okay, and that's a pretty blue sky. Remember, acrylics are going to dry darker, so that's going to be fairly dark. So I'll add just a touch more white into that, I think. and just lighten that back a bit. So now if you've seen Bob Ross, Bill Alexander and all the offshoots of them, when they paint a sky, they'll put down magic white first, and then they'll paint just straight blue and they'll mix it on the canvas. I think it's easy to mix it on the palette and just do to do bands and then just blur those edges in. So I'll show you what I mean. So we've got our mix there. We'll take some of this liquefying medium into that mix. As soon as you add it in, you can feel the paint just work a lot smoother, a lot easier. So we get a load of paint there. We start at this top corner here and we just paint a band across like so. Okay, just nice and gently, pretty easy, and that liquefying medium just helps that paint to flow on a lot easier. So it depends on what brand of paint you're using. You may or may not need to use the liquefying medium, but certainly if you're using the Artillery Interactives or other sort of professional acrylic paints, then it probably helps when you want to get a nice smooth transition there. Okay, now that's too dark. It's going to clash with our tree, so I need to come in with the white now. Okay, you can see that mixing up there. A little bit more of that liquefying medium. Don't want to use too much of it. And then let's just work that up here. Okay, now probably going to need to work reasonably quickly so we can come back in with the blending on this. So I'll speed up a little bit now that I've explained the idea to you. So more white. A little bit more of the liquefying medium. And when I come up towards these darks, I want to avoid those if I can. What we'll do is pull out some of the paint off the brush with some paper towel. Okay. And then just along the edges there, just soften it in. Just back and forward. Okay, now you've got to do this reasonably quickly, otherwise it will dry out. If it dries out, I could just squirt it with my water bottle. Just a tiny little squirt would all it would need. Now it's just a matter of reversing the process. So we'll take more of that blue back into the mix there, a little bit more of that liquefying medium, maybe a touch of white into it. And then we start down the bottom this time. Our darkest value in the water is going to be at the bottom, and we're going to get lighter as we work up. So I'm just pulling paint out of the brush again, and then I can just come and soften in there. Just blend it in. Okay folks, well, I think we've done a pretty good job of our blocking. It's coming along quite nicely here. It's pretty much on track as to where I was hoping it would be at the end of the blocking. So what we need to do now is just let this dry. Now some artists you might see on YouTube and so on, they'll dry with a hairdryer, which is perfectly fine. I find it goes a little bit dull and a little bit flat, so I like to let it dry naturally. And take half an hour. I'll go and have a cup of tea, and then we'll see you after the break, and then we'll do step 3, which is our details, highlights, finishing touches, and this is when the painting will start to really come alive. But we've got down a good foundation for this painting now. We've got our value structure set up, got our lovely gradient in the sky and the water, and we've set the scene, and we'll come along and put the icing on the cake, if you like, after the break, so I'll see you shortly. Okay folks, welcome back. We're now going to do step 3 of the Moore method of painting, which is of course our details, highlights and finishing touches. Let this dry off. It's all settled down quite nicely, and I think we're in a good position now to really advance this painting forward. What we'll start off by doing is just getting in the darks for our birch trees in here first, and getting the darks in, well, that'll give us time to let that dry when we come in and work into the other trees, and then we can come back to the birch trees after that. So on the palette here, I've just refreshed my ultramarine blue, still got the alizarin crimson there and the yellow ochre, so that's our basic palette. To that I've added a couple of booster colours, our cadmium red and our cadmium yellow. It might be a cadmium yellow light, and a little bit more of the titanium white. So we're keeping the palette very, very simple, very straightforward here today. And in order to get the darks in for the birch tree, I'm going to start off using a little flat brush here, okay? And we need a sort of a dark brown tone. So we'll get our alizarin crimson, I'll just pop it there, and our yellow ochre, okay? Mix those two together, and that'll give us a reddy orange. This is how you mix up a brown. For those who've done our colour mixing course, you'll already be familiar with this. Get those two together like so, and then we'll just gradually add in the ultramarine blue. Okay, that paint's getting just a little bit tacky, but it's okay. Add in that ultramarine blue, and what that does is it just pushes it towards a brown tone. As you can see there, that's not a bad dark brown, is it? Very simple to say. You don't need to buy Van Dyke brown or any of the other browns that you may be buying. You just mix it up using our basic palette that we educate everyone to use here at Moore Learn to Paint Academy and then Learn to Paint TV. Okay, so there's our mix. Take a little bit of this flowing medium, liquefying medium. Just mix some of that in. That'll just help me to get that to run a bit smoother. And I'll just load up the end of the brush. You can see there's a fair bit of paint on there, isn't there? But what we want to do is just find where these trees are going to go. And we've got one main one that runs sort of down through there. There's one there, okay. Maybe just strengthen it up a little bit in parts. So start off keeping these fairly thin, which is why I'm using just a thin little brush here. Because you can always make them thicker, but it's harder to make them thinner. So that, you know, always creep up to how thick you want them, right? So I'm just using the edge of that brush. Trust me, if you start off making them too thick at the beginning and you think, oh no, that's too thick, I need to make that thinner, well, you basically have to repaint your sky and so on, and that's not fun. Okay, like so. And I'm just placing these here so that we can give this dark a little bit of time to dry while we work on other areas. Okay, we probably want to have, do I want to have one that runs back that way? Maybe. I'll just run it back through there. Okay. Just for a bit of interest's sake. Bit of a random sort of, I don't know, the birch trees actually will do that, but not to worry, they are in our painting, and you know, it's our painting, so we can pretty much do it any way we will want. Don't get too caught up in rules, and I mean, there are principles of painting that you want to get caught up in those, because that's what makes a good painting. But in terms of, oh, you can't do a birch tree like that, well, yes I can, I just did. Okay. Careful I don't get too wide with that one. Okay, so there we go. So we've got a little bit of a cluster of birch trees, and we'll put branches and things on there. For the moment, we'll just get those trunks in. And what we want now is a medium green, a mid-tone green. So we know that our greens are a combination of blue, okay, and our yellow ochre. So I'll mix those two together, and that'll give us an earthy, almost an olivey green like so. I'm going to use that as the basis of my mid-tone green, and then we'll vary the tone up from there. So I'll just load the tip by pulling the tip back and forward through that paint. Let me just give you a close-up there. Okay, I'm just pulling that tip through the paint like so. I don't want too much paint on here. Pardon me. And then we're just going to just come in here. Now the key here is to be careful that we don't paint out the darks that are already there. Those darks are a critical part of creating form. And I'm just trying to get that sort of rounded shape that you get with trees. Okay, now when we come to this big poplar tree, I'll go just slightly lighter, so a little bit more yellow ochre in there. This is not our highlight, this is our mid-tone. And the poplar trees sort of run that way. Sorry, the willow tree. So you want to run it down like that. So just twist the brush and drag. Okay, and let the tip of the canvas just drag that paint off. If you ever get a chance to go to Monet's home in Givany, it is a wonderful experience, and he's got these beautiful old willow trees that on the embankments there of his ponds. Okay, that's good. And we're going to put in those little poplar trees or pine trees. We'll take that blue, we'll take a little bit of red, and a little bit of the yellow ochre. Okay, and I'm just going to load the tip of that fan brush and just run it down. Now these are sitting in behind the other trees, so we're not going to see them fully. Don't make that one too big because it'll compete with all that over there. In my original one, it was a little bit too big, I felt. Okay, and let's just... So again, we're just getting that shadow tone in the same way we did before. Okay, what I will do, I'll take some of our cadmium red there, some of the cadmium yellow, mix those together, get a little touch of the yellow ochre in there. Okay, that gives us a nice sort of orange tone, sort of a fall, or what we call autumn here in Australia. And I'm just going to just put in just a little shape of a tree there with a bit of colour. Maybe there's a slightly bigger one here. And look, we're doing this as a beginner level painting, so I'm not really painting any particular type of tree. I'm just making tree shapes, okay, with a bit of different colour. So don't ask me what tree it is and so on. I'm just making it up as we go, right? Because this is a beginner painting. It's a very basic level, right, is what we're trying to achieve here. So I'm not painting any particular type of tree. Okay, in our more advanced classes, we'll look at individual trees, although we've got a willow tree and we have, you know, poplar trees and so on. But those little touches of orange there, that could be any kind of tree that you want it to be. Obviously a deciduous tree, I guess that's the important point. Now I'm using some more cadmium yellow here, and we're just going to put some highlights in. Just very light touch. Okay. Maybe there's a little bit over here as well. But But using this approach, pretty much anybody can get started learning how to paint and get realistic sort of looking. Take our blue into our green mix here, a little bit more of that yellow ochre. Okay, and then we're just going to, as I said, we're just going to drag that green into these shapes here. Like so. We'll come in and we'll get those oranges. In there as well. So notice before when I was up the top here, I was trying to create a rounded sort of feel. Now I'm just purely just dragging the reflections into the water. Now, while I've got this brush, we'll come in here, we'll get some of this tone in here, and let's just start just working up some grasses. So I'm just using this fan brush to flick up these edges here. Okay, and then I'll just come to a slightly bigger brush. And we'll just continue on, just popping some foliage and so on in here. A fairly loose way to do it, I know. We've got our sort of browny tone in there. What we want is to have it mostly white, like so. Okay, I'll put just a pinhead of the yellow ochre in there. And mix that up so that it's not pure white. So we've got a nice little pile of that there. Clean up the palette knife and then just cut through that paint like so, so that I end up with a ribbon on there. Okay, and then coming up to our so you just got to be careful how you then apply this paint. You can use a palette knife as I'm showing you there, or I'll show you the other way you could do it, is come back to our small little brush here, load that paint up there, and then it's probably a bit easier with the brush because you can see what's going on. But as you, because that paint's still wet, so as you work into it, it's going to pick up that brown. So you need to be mindful of that and just keep cleaning that brush. And then keep loading up more paint. Pop that one in front. Okay. Our small rigger brush. I'll swish it into this liquefying medium and then into this brown tree trunk tone. Load the tip of it up, and then let's just run in some twigs and things. Just be careful it doesn't get too clumpy. As you can see, it's getting there. So you just want that paint on the tip, and when it runs out, just in a few spots, knock some of that white back a bit. Just to tone it back a bit, it was a little bit too much of the white, and it's standing out a little bit on the... That's better, isn't it? I think that works much better. Scrap some of that back, it's all a bit dry, and let's just get a few little indications of some water ripples in here. One of the things that you've got to be really careful of not overdoing is water ripples, but if you can get them right, then they are so effective in getting that look of, you know, water, reflections in water. Well, folks, I think we're pretty well finished this one. I'll show you the reference we're working off, a little sketch that I did. It's perhaps a little bit more orange in parts, a little bit brighter than the one we've done today, but this is our version today. And maybe I could put a little bit more yellow into the trees here and so on. I'll leave that for you to decide. But overall, I think we've managed to capture the painting that we were working off and create a nice little river scene with some birch trees and some fall colours. So I hope you've enjoyed today's painting project. I've certainly enjoyed doing it. Trying to keep it nice and simple. It looks like there's a lot of detail in there, there's a lot of information, but in reality, it's a pretty simple painting the way we approach it. Now you can detail it up a lot more if you like, and some of you will do that, I know. But if you're just starting out, this is a painting that you should know that you can have a go at and get a great result. Just follow the 3 steps that we talked about. Use the 3 basic colours plus our 2 booster colours and the brushes that we've used, and just follow along what I've done, and you too can produce a great looking painting like this one. And as a beginner, you'd be pretty happy to hang that up on your wall or give it as a gift to family and friends and so on, and they'll think you're a genius, right? So hope you've enjoyed this episode. Make sure you check out every episode of Learn to Paint TV at our website, which I'll put on the screen for you. And if you have enjoyed what we've done here today and you want to learn more, then we've got a free course that you can take over at the Learn to Paint Academy. I've got a full course which I'll give to you for free, and that goes into the more method of painting in a little bit more detail. So just go to the Learn to Paint Academy, www.learntopaint.academy, web address underneath me here, and then look for the button that says free course. Go and check it out, and you'll learn a lot more about our approach at the Learn to Paint Academy. My name's Rod Moore. See you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers for now.